Welcome to Energy Stew. This is Peter Roth, your host. And I'd like to ask you, how's the year going? How much of it is under your belt and that you understand the nature of the year? Probably not much. It's just the hints of it. And we have a lot ahead of us. So to understand it more, I've asked Alexander Dunlop, our card specialist and a good friend, to be on the show to talk about what he can present to us about the energy for this coming year. And we'll start the show with that. Then I'll follow talking about the hexagrams of the Chinese I Ching that I threw, if you know what that means, through the coins, to have them show us what to expect for this year. And it was amazing what these coins showed us. So we're going to talk about that later, but we're going to start off with Alexander. Hi, Alexander, welcome.
Thank you, Peter. It's a pleasure to be on your show as always, and good to talk to you.
Yeah, it's so wonderful. And you and I have planned, I asked you, what could you present that would really help our audience know something about this year that could be meaningful, and we could use it with perspective as the year unfolds. And you came up with a good idea. So what is it?
Well, yes. So it's understanding the meaning of the numbers, the meaning of so we have a 2019, the 2 and the 1 and the 9. When we add those up and reduce them, we get the number 3. So it is a 3-year that we're stepping into by our collective consciousness, by our collective agreement of the usage of these numbers. And last year, 2018, was a 2-year. And the 2-year would have been a really good time to focus on partnerships. And I knew that going in, and I taught it to my students in the beginning of the year. And so I've set my year around how am I going to form my partnerships? And what am I going to do to engage connections, networks, and building these partnerships and alliances?
And might it also be about duality, about opposing forces, one against another, almost like could be even a standstill too. It could be an integration, but it also could be a standstill. It has those options.
Well, right. I mean, there's the binary opposition of the two, one and another, positive, negative, male, female, and yes, there can be that opposition.
We had a huge year for that. The Me Too movement, for instance, huge about male-female opposition. And then our government is also standoffish. There was opposing forces that stayed opposing. It was a standstill, really, because Congress was blocked. And so there are so many ways the two was apparent this last year.
Well, right. And that was the next part I was going to say, is that just because it was a year of partnership doesn't mean that that's what people unfortunately focused on or did. And you're right. The negative side of the 2 can be this binary opposition. And I also see the 2 as a feminine number. The even numbers are feminine, and you referenced the Me Too movement, this great feminine outpouring, we can say, of looking to balance this imbalanced duality where the masculine was too dominant and feminine wanting to find that balance. That you're right. That's a very important part of 2018.
Right. Every number has its plus and minus.
Yeah.
And I think last year, in so many ways, was frustrating. But it was a breakthrough. The Me Too movement was really a breakthrough, and it was hard to take. And so many things last year were hard to take. And standoffish in terms of governments opposition. Nothing really resolved itself last year. Not that I can.
Well, yes, and we may say that the Me Too movement was a force to balance this imbalance, to find this integrative harmony between masculine and feminine, to find that binary duality in a more balanced way, and a necessary fixing and recalibration of a long time of imbalance of that duality.
Yeah, it used the two.
Yeah.
Took advantage of the opportunity of being able to identify the binary or the duality aspect of our genders.
Yeah, very interesting. The two is often associated with logic as well for the same reason. Like computer chips are built upon this binary logic of zeros and ones. And it was definitely a big year for our trying to understand how to bring balance with the use of technology. These are ones and zeros.
It brought us a lot of information, but not resolution that I can see.
Yeah, it brought those questions out of how do we balance privacy and freedom and social technology use with its misuse, I guess.
Right. So there's so many ways that we can look at last year and understand what's behind us, hopefully, and why we can look forward to a new number, the number 3. And I was listening to how you described how to get to a 3, but I see it really just as you said, but my own calculation was 20 and 19 is 39, and that becomes a 12, and that becomes a 3.
Yes, I mean, we can do that as well, and but the fundamental reduction of a 3, 12. I mean, we could, depends how deep we want to go into this.
Yes,
discussion.
because 12 has its own.
Yeah, 12 has its own meaning, and is a master number. And last year was an 11 and a 2, but just reducing it down to a 2 for.
And actually, an 11 is the 2 towers of good and evil that we have to walk in between. And last year there was a lot of that, managing the duality of those opposing forces.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
So that gives us good perspective to begin a new year. And I mean, it is fun to speculate. I wonder how we're going to see the 3 played out. The 3 is about creating a new pathway. And we'll see what we can create collectively in a culture based on what's happened already in political and social ways.
Yes, and a new pathway. Well, the 3 has a lot of other energies at play in creating a new pathway.
Yeah.
So we can
a lot of variety, a lot of possibility.
3, to me, a 3 is a very integrative, expansive number where there are a lot of people who come together. Whereas the 2, where they were kind of watching each other and opposing each other and trying to find their way together, the 3 is kind of when the party starts.
Yeah, it can be. Yeah. There's a third option, like, oh, there's another possibility. We don't have to be in headlock. What's that expression? When 2 sides are just
juggernaut.
Yeah.
But it's really that, it creates the mix. All of a sudden, the 2s were kind of standing, 2 towers of the 11 standing opposing each other, and now all of a sudden, there's this ability to exchange and to
to find a new possibility.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so it's really an opportunity now, I think, that um, and later when we're done talking about the numbers, I had amazing, and it'll make sense following what we're talking about to talk about what the I Ching tells
Yeah.
us about this year too,
Yeah.
because it all works together beautifully. And so let's imagine what a 3 means to us right now.
Well, it could mean a lot of uncertainty, as we don't know what the new possibility is. And so that can lead to some stress and anxiety. So that would be something for us to be aware of, is getting lost in all the possibility of what it might be, and that leading to some stress and anxiety for us.
Right, but it's an action number. So it's the opportunity to stir the pot a lot.
It is. And that comes from our own instinct or our own self, as you say. It's active. It's our own energy. It's not looking for someone else to do it. It's doing it for ourselves. It's being active. It's initiating that.
With each other, because it's a very social number.
Yeah, it can be.
Sure.
And yeah, and the way I look at the 3 is I follow the symbolism that's represented in the deck of 52, which is the book of life hidden in plain sight. The 3 pips are in a line. So whenever you have a 3 represented, it's in a straight line. And it's the opportunity to find that middle pathway, to find that alignment. But that can be shaky, and there's no way to reinforce that. It's a single line. It's almost like a compass heading. So we're looking for our true north this year, trying to find our way.
Yeah, but by stirring the pot, by mixing it up, and just thinking that the phrase that 3 is a crowd. So all of a sudden, we came from 2, a couple, to all of a sudden having a crowd, because 3 it doesn't mean just 3 people. It can mean a big mix of interaction to create expansion and opportunity and find direction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's the part. That's the part. And as with all of these, it's a double-edged sword, so to speak, because that crowdedness can be the very thing that's overwhelming to us. That variety, right? So we have all the variety and possibility, and which one do we choose?
Yeah, but it also might be a relief that doors are open that weren't open before. So granted, you have to know what doors you're going through and appropriately, but
Right.
still, we've been through a year of standoffishness, of frustration, of things happening that exposed a lot. We received a lot of information this last year, but we weren't able to stir the pot enough yet.
Well, right. We don't know the pathway of resolution, and that's on the high side. That's our opportunity, and I would take it down to the personal level, which is for each of us to find that personal pathway. And as you say, test the waters and try a lot of different things, maybe, or open ourselves up to different possibilities. And that takes courage as well, to look and see what's available and to go through different doors. Oh, that's not it. Let me try this, and use that process to find our pathway.
Right. And then 3 is followed likely by the 4 the next year.
Yeah.
And that, so I think it's good to look at that while we're starting a 3 year, to see that the following year, for me, the 4 has more to do with foundation.
Yes.
And things will be much more logical and make much more sense.
Right. Yep. Things will settle down after, like, this year could be kind of a wild ride, as you say, too. Like, the pot is stirred, things are open. It could be kind of a wild ride for us. And then the 4 year things settle into a more solid structure.
Right. Well, as I said earlier, it's the party year because it's the mix, and we don't know what'll happen, but there's much more integration, interaction,
Yeah.
um, and not so much isolation or opposition. I mean, of course, there'll be opposition because there always is, but it might be more active in ways that lead us to the fore of the next year, lead us to.
Well, that's right. And a lot of the wildness and the variety and the crowdedness will also be a test of our own inner resolve to follow our pathway. We may get a lot of contradictory opinions and advice and information revealed this year. And
Yeah,
how do we find our own true pathway in the midst of all that?
right. It could be too busy, too much going on.
Can be.
But in a way that will be satisfying because we need a lot of action. We need to feel that we're making progress through.
Well, I hope that that's how people see it. That would be my coaching and insight, is to look at that as progress, where people could be tempted to look at that as chaos.
Right. So I'm glad we're talking about it because well, we're used to chaos anyway.
Yeah.
But it's not disappearing.
Yeah, it's not. And if anything, it's going to get wilder.
Yeah.
It's going to get more chaotic at first.
But maybe less frustrating in the previous oppositions that we had that we couldn't resolve.
Maybe.
So at least we're in the ring, fighting for the win rather than being held in our separate corners.
Well, that's right. And there's a lot of potential and possibility there, as I mentioned. I'll just say that for me, as I step into this year, I am focused on what is my pathway. Right? Last year, I mentioned I was focused on creating partnerships. This year, and you mentioned what's the meaningful frame of reference that we can use throughout the year. And for me, it's going to be, what is my true pathway here?
Good. I'm personally from my last birthday till my next in October, I'm in a 3-year myself.
Okay.
So it's exciting. It's because it's about expansion through being active.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wonderful. So I'm so glad that we could have this conversation because I think it helps people just be able to hold it in a way that they can make sense of it. Say, okay, this is happening, but it's supposed to happen. This is just the way this year is.
Right.
And knowing that the following year will be easier because it'll be more foundational.
Well, we hope. I mean, it may or may not. I don't like to put those easier or harder.
I like that idea because I want to be hopeful. But I think the dust might settle more from this year and from last year.
It may. And the game goes on, as in Star Trek, the journey continues.
After that, it's a 5, and a 5 is being hungry and not feeling like we have enough. Yeah. So it's all growth. So I know you have to leave, and I'll continue the show talking about the hexagrams of the I Ching that I've thrown. I'll explain what that means. Yeah. But Alexander Dunlop, you're at lifeelevated.life.
Lifeelevated.life, and you can look up your cards to play on the site. There's a free tool to find out what your personal cards are for your life.
Wonderful. Alexander, thanks so much for being on.
Thank you for having me, Peter. Always a pleasure.
Okay. Mine too. And now we're going to talk about the Chinese I Ching. And I threw hexagrams. And what it is, the I Ching is an ancient book of from China that's divided up into 64 parts, and each part is represented by 6 horizontal lines, one on top of another. And they're either a solid line or a broken line representing yang or yin. And historically, it's a divination tool. So you can either draw straws or you can throw coins, and the way the coins land tell you which lines of the hexagram to build from. And so you throw 3 coins 6 times and see what shows up. So I could go on about that, but I'd really like to tell you the result of the coins I threw. And you might say, you might also say that, how could that mean anything? Coins landing is just so random. But I've been throwing these coins for over 50 years, and they always are remarkable in what they have to tell us. So it is an incredible divination tool. And so I threw 6 coins, and my first question to the I Ching was, what do we need to know about this year? Just give us some information about what we need. And the first hexagram that came up were all yang lines, 6 in a row. And that's the number 1 hexagram of the 64, because it's all the power of creation. It's all, since it's all yang, it's all making things happen in the most powerful way possible. So this year is all about creating, and that's not all though, because there was a changing line in it when the 3 coins come up exactly the same. In other words, instead of 2 out of 3, I had 3 out of 3, only for the 3rd line. And that line had to do with that corrupt power causes ruin for that power. So it's saying that we're in this year of creation, but anything that has been corrupt will destroy itself. It's amazing. That's what this says. And if you're an expert at the I Ching, or if you have a book to go to and understand it in your own way, you can. This is how I'm reading it, but it's very clear to me that this is what it means. But then, because it's a changing line, it leads to the second changing or changed hexagram, which means that the 3rd line, which was a changing line, because it was all of one coin, of one side of a coin, has to become the other side. It just flows over. And so it changes to another hexagram where the 3rd line is actually a yin line, and that's the 10th hexagram. And so here we have creation, and power corrupts, or power leads to ruin, corrupt power leads to ruin. And now we go to this new hexagram that it created by the changing line of the 10, which means you have to behave properly. You need proper decorum. So it's interesting how it took that first hexagram and changed it into an appropriate 2nd hexagram about if corruption of power causes ruin, decorum is what we need, proper behavior. So we're moving into a time where we'll be trying to understand how to do things as honorably as possible. And not that many of us haven't, but the powers that be that haven't and are ruining themselves are teaching us to maintain decorum and to keep things appropriate and normalized to what we believe in. All right. Now, then I threw another hexagram, because I wanted to know if this year is going to make sense or not. And I got the 54th hexagram with two changing lines, in the fourth line and the sixth line. And so the 54 is ambition. So this is a year that what will make sense is that it's going to be very ambitious. And yet the fourth line says that we have to have patience. And then the sixth line says it still won't be satisfying enough. So it'll just keep pushing us more to be ambitious and still maintaining patience. And then that changed because it had two changing lines. It changed into the 41st hexagram. And that was understanding that there are limitations. So here we're going to be in creation with a lot of ambition, needing patience, feeling like we can never do enough, and certainly leading to the 41st hexagram, which is limitation. It's being hungry for more and really understanding that we're always going to want more, and that's good because that'll keep us creating more and more. So I hope this is helping you start the year. I'm glad I could do this for you. And we have some great shows coming up. And Heart River has some great classes coming up. So you can go to heartriver.org and see what we're doing. Our Monday night classes are really going to be super. And so this is Peter Roth, your host of Energy Stew at prn.fm. And I can be reached at peter@heartriver.org, HEART river.org. And thank you so much for listening. I'd love to hear from you, and have a great year.